Hello lovelies, and welcome to today's video. My name's Alya and I'm so glad you stopped by. So you may notice, if you're not new here, that this is a very different background to what I usually do. So I'm actually sitting in the car waiting outside my 6-year-old's art class that he absolutely loves. We're so blessed to have found an amazing teacher who took his chance on a 6-year-old to do just amazing exploration of his talents and interests. And today I am going to be very much speaking on a suitable topic, I believe, talking about driving vision, and more specifically, what are the standards for just private vehicle driving? How do we measure them, and how would you know if you need to have it checked out, or perhaps you're not meeting those standards? So just a quick little chat on all of that sort of good stuff relating to driving. If you're interested in a little chat about driving vision and creating this soft glam Sunday look, very quick and easy, I might add, please do stick around and watch me totally regret this camera angle, but we'll get straight into it. Okay, I may regret doing all this because I probably am going to hate the angle that this camera is sitting on, but you know what, it's cool. So the first thing I want to address is how the standards would be very different in different countries and sometimes even in different states. So before I go into any details, I do want to point out that this is the standard for Australia and probably more specific for Victoria, which is where I live. But the standard is pretty consistent throughout the entire country here in Australia, and I wouldn't imagine it'd be too different overseas, because why would it be? I mean, we all require similar things, or we all drive similar cars and similar roads and things like that, so I imagine things would be pretty competitive around the globe. So I do feel that you need to sort of check if that's the case in your country, but I'm pretty confident it will be. So first things first, how do we measure vision for driving? How do we know someone is okay to drive? I mean, we're given this huge responsibility to judge whether somebody is safe to be on our roads, you know, to drive around our neighborhoods, and potentially even a commercial vehicle, so like a paid driver, so a cab driver or a bus driver or something like that. So it's a huge responsibility that they've left to the professionals in the private sector. So, you know, you got to sort of put a little bit of importance on these sort of things. So the way that there is a sort of a trust system, and that is to standardize it. So the standard test, as far as I'm concerned, around the world, is the Snellen chart. Now, Snellen is just a type of font and a particular kind of spacing between the letters to give us all an equal chance to read a particular size of letter. So the letter size in Australia is 612 or better. That translates to 20/40 vision in feet. So, you know, it's not exactly fantastic vision, I have to say. So if somebody is 6'9" or 6'12", I'm already saying to them, oh, you know, how are you coping? And here we are allowing people to drive with this vision. Now the reality is that might sound like it's a double standard, but the reality is that people who come to have low vision, they didn't come to have it overnight. So it's not like you know, you have 20/20 vision today and then tomorrow you have 6'12" or 20/40 and then you go and sit in the car. No, this is usually something gradual. This is usually something the brain adapts to. So when you do have this decrease in vision, because it's happened over a period of time, it's usually more something that you cope with really well. So we have to keep that in mind, that most people actually see really well in real life, even though they don't necessarily read the letters fantastically. So something else to keep in mind. But yes, 612 or better in one eye at least, but overall with two eyes open. So the Australian board that controls all this says just 612 with two eyes open, but reality is that we want to know which eye it is and whether the other one is poor. The other thing that we discern is the field of vision, so your peripheral vision more specifically. Now that's done with a very particular test. It's called a binocular Esterman. So Esterman is just a name. It's obviously the person who came up with the test was Esterman, and he came up with this binocular test. Now this is a very unique field test. Anyone who has done a field test in the past has been told to look at a particular target, not move their eyes, blink only when necessary, all that sort of stuff. But with an Esterman, you can behave completely naturally, look around side to side, blink as much as you would to be driving. So it's supposed to be completely reproducing the driving environment. And it tends to be pretty good, pretty accurate. Most people do okay on an Esterman, and I haven't really had any sort of complaints about someone who's done well in an estimate and then hasn't been able to back out of their driveway or something like that. So I would say it's fairly accurate. It's not necessarily an easy test, but it's not very sort of high demand either. So all it's really asking you to do is to see 110 degrees horizontally in your vision. If you think about it, 180 degrees is just, you know, stretching your arms out side to side and still being able to see them when you look straight ahead. And most of us can do that. What we're asking is for you to see basically your windscreen without having to move your head around too much. So it's really not a huge ask, considering you also have to have at least your side mirrors, or better still, a little bit of your blind spot. So it's actually very, very generous in my opinion. And as I mentioned, most people do quite well with it. Someone who's driving a commercial vehicle, however, will have to have a little bit more than that. So if you want to be a truck driver or drive a school bus or something like that, you will need a little bit more. I think it's 140 degrees. So almost the full range of field you need to have, which is fair enough. You know, if you're driving people around as a profession, you want to have the best possible sight to do that. We also have to understand that glasses and things like that do limit our peripheral vision a little bit because of the frame. So we also need to understand that that's why we allow someone to move their eyes around during an estimate, because they'll have a wider field of vision being able to move their eyes around than being limited by whatever's in front of their eyes, like a pair of glasses, or even if they do have a defect, if they're particularly good at searching quickly, if they have good reflexes, for example, that also needs to be taken into consideration and rewarded. Okay, so what do you guys have in your country? I'd be interested to hear what is the restrictions in your country. So if you have to have a vision correction to drive in Australia, you'll have an S for spectacles on your driver's license, which is funny because how do the police tell, you know, if you're wearing contact lenses or you've had, I don't know, surgery recently? Or I always get asked, you know, oh, I'm going to have cataract surgery, I need to change my license. Look, you do, and we're happy to provide you with a letter, but actually it's down to the individual to have that chased up. And usually people come back and tell me, oh, you know, the policeman was very understanding and that sort of thing, but you know, you have to take it, it's a huge trust system. So it's an interesting concept really that they print this onto your license, because yeah, anyway, it's something to research in your own state or your own region. Okay. So a few common questions that patients ask me in the clinic about their driving is, oh, I can see road signs really well. I can read a street sign from meters and meters away, not a problem, but I can't see my dashboard. What does that mean? Look, it probably means that it's not just the dashboard. Your computer screen's no good, books are a little bit harder to see, prices at the supermarket, ingredients at the backs of packets, all that sort of close-up stuff is probably also hard to see. It's not just the dash. And that probably means that you're at a stage where reading glasses are a fixture in your life. It happens to all of us sooner or later. So it's normal, it's not a problem. But then you don't want to wear glasses because far-away vision is so good. Fair enough. Now, either you learn to deal with the dash being a little bit out of sorts and you can still read it fairly well. I mean, we know where the 20, 40, 60, whatever miles or kilometers, whatever it is per hour sits on the speedometer and things like that. So you more or less can tell. But if it's becoming a nuisance or it's becoming a hazard for you, multifocals. Sadly but truly, that's probably the best option because it doesn't reduce your distance vision, but it does completely benefit your intermittent vision. And with multifocals, there are different ones in existence. You can get ones that are for distance and intermediate that don't really do much for near, and then your zones are much larger and they're much more easy to adapt to, and they don't have as much blur and all that sort of good stuff. So there are definitely glass designs that are suitable for the driver specifically. But what about in the opposite situation? What if you can see the dash really, really well? And this will happen a lot in younger people. So the steering wheel, the car in front of you, things immediately around you, say even up to 2 meters, might be fine. So 2 meters is roughly 6 feet, will be fine. But then what happens? If, even though everything immediately to you is fine, you can't really see road signs and things like that? What does that mean? Look, that's probably short-sightedness, because you can see really well close up, and far away stuff is not so easy to see. And that means that even when you wear glasses, even if you wear regular just driving glasses, you will actually be better off all round. So you don't necessarily need to go into multifocals, although some people will. It might not necessarily be the case. It just depends on how large of a script you require. And if you've been driving along pretty happily until this point, it won't be too bad. So it's something to consider that, you know, all these things might be a little bit more scary in theory than what they are in practice. Okay guys, quick pause on talking about driving. I will never ever leave the house without a bag of these, especially if I'm going to be doing my makeup in the car, because that right there, that's mascara. That's so funny. Yeah. Another very sensitive thing that often comes up in clinic is when should I, or perhaps a relative, give up driving? And that could be not necessarily an age-related thing. That could be just a vision-related thing. Could be a temporary, something that they do temporarily just for their safety until something can be done. You know, something like that. Basically, I'm a big advocate of trusting people to judge it for themselves. Nobody wants to go out and hurt their family or somebody else's child or pet because they're just adamant on being independent or something like that. In today's world, I mean, it's a little bit different, literally today's world because of COVID, but generally speaking, we have Uber, we have really good access to things like taxis, and a lot of places will have public transport or charity groups that will deliver groceries, or even supermarkets that might have a service that delivers groceries. So we're not exactly trapped most of the time without a car or without being able to drive. So for the majority of people, and I do absolutely understand there are exceptions to this depending on where you live and what your requirements are and all that sort of jazz. I get it. I totally get it. And that happens to patients right here in the heart of suburban Melbourne. You know, so of course it would happen in places that are a little bit more remote or a little bit harder to access or don't have such good infrastructure, things like that, like the public transport. You know, I get it. It would happen to anyone, anywhere, and sometimes driving is your only bet. But if there is any chance that you can perhaps do it during the day rather than nighttime, because daytime vision is typically better than nighttime. If there's any chance you can do it in non-peak hour, so when there's very few people on the road, and preferably during school hours, so there are no children around. And if you could ask a friend, if not someone to actually drive you, maybe just be a co-pilot. I feel like these are all things that would improve your chances. And this is assuming you're within driving standard, just you're not as confident anymore. Also, vision's not the only thing we need for driving. We need good reactions, we need good reflexes, we need good occupational therapy as well. So, you know, our feet have to work, our hands have to work, our neck has to work, and of course our responses have to work really, really, really accurately. And it's so hugely important. Sight is something that's quite adaptable. Our brain does so much of our sight, so it's very flexible in that respect. Whereas some of the other things I can't personally comment on. It's not something I do professionally, but my experience will say that if your limbs are deteriorating, it's going to have a huge impact. I would almost argue more so than if your eyes are deteriorating. I will say though that if you're going to be advising a parent or an elderly member of your family about this, tread very lightly. You know, try not to offend or to make them feel like they're being controlled in any way. In my experience, the best thing is to present them with the facts and let them do the responsible thing. You know, or even, you know, weigh up the fact that maybe their insurance is going up, or it's a big hazard for them financially to be continuing to maintain a car, because there's also that. You know, find ways to reason with them. I would definitely advise against just flat out saying to a relative or to a family member, you're not driving anymore. That's it. We're taking your keys away, intervention, boom. And I'm sure there are people out there that would work better on. And of course, to any rule, there is an exception. But my experience has said if you give especially an older person, some facts, they'll pretty much turn to reason and logic. I have not yet had someone argue with me that they need to continue driving when they shouldn't. My own granddad went through a patch of bad vision. He's far better now and he's totally fine now, but he gave up driving for, I think it was like 2 months or something like that. And it was just such a huge disturbance in their life. Especially that my grandma depends on his driving. It wasn't just him that suffered, it was her too. And this was during lockdown, so they were limited in their movements anyway. Look, we were able to support them, and that's lucky that we are able to do that. But a lot of the time, if you just turn to reason and logic, there are ways to get around it. And oftentimes it is a temporary thing. Like, for example, they may just need cataract surgery, or they may just have, you know, a low part in their health, but they may bounce back, things like that. So you really got to give these adults in your life the respect and the chance to make the decision themselves. And if they can't, then obviously there are things you have to do. But generally speaking, I haven't yet experienced somebody who is going to present a danger to society at the cost of driving. The other thing we as young people don't appreciate, that for elderly, driving is their last means of independence because they can't walk anymore. It will prove quite expensive to rely on taxis and Uber full time. And also they're now in COVID, they are interacting with more people doing things via public transport or through drivers. So some of the time it might be a church organization or a charity group or something. They may be able to organize a private driver that will work on taxi rates, for example. That way you are not interacting with the general population so much. There are ways to do these things safely, and I would urge that you research every single avenue to respect that person's independence if they are facing giving up their own ability to drive. So yep, just a little summary: 6-12 or 20-40 or better on a Snellen chart. So that's I'll make sure that you guys know what that looks like. A 110-degree or better result on a binocular field test, preferably the estimate. That's the gold standard in Australia. And the other thing I'll mention is that if you do have a progressive disease, for example, you're diabetic, or you have glaucoma, or your vision fluctuates for whatever reason, keratoconus is another one, any reason that your vision may change in a short period of time, please do make it your responsibility to do these tests roughly yearly. That would be my recommendation as a clinician, sort of 12 to 14 monthly. Sometimes you have to do it more often, that's unique, but for the most part I would be doing this at least yearly, because that way you are in your own mind reassured that you're not presenting a hazard and you're safe. So sometimes, because as I mentioned before, vision is such a progressive thing and the brain is so good at adapting, you may feel like you can see just fine, but you can't. And that's the reality of it, which means that you won't know if that's a shadow in front of you 6 meters up the road, or if that's a child. You will not know. Or a cat, you will not know. And that is the most concerning thing of all, is that you feel like you're going to know because the general vision is still there, but often details are lacking. So yeah, I urge frequent testing, not because I'm a clinician, but because I've seen the good it brings. A little bit of natural glam today, because I think that's plenty for a Sunday, sitting outside my kids' school. If you like this video and you like the information, please go ahead and press like. Leave me a comment if there's something you would like me to speak on further. I will mention also that recently somebody asked me a question on Instagram, and it was more than a pleasure to answer it, and I'm so grateful that I'm in a position to help with a little bit of advice. So yeah, go ahead if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, please subscribe if you haven't already. Go ahead, there's plenty of room. There's no limit on subscriptions, and we're only 37 at this point, so go ahead and subscribe, spread the word. I'm happy to hear out what you'd like me to talk on. Is there a particular medical issue you'd like me to speak on, especially if it's related to eyes? I'm more than happy to bring it here. Wherever you are around the world, lovelies, I hope you're staying safe and healthy and happy, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye.